it's not popular to study your sexual energy. And it's interesting. And so this was a case study of my own, and I'll share that with you. And so I wanted to, I'm always trying to explore where unconscious behavior is limiting my perception of the world. So I wanted to study my sexual energy, and really what I wanted to study was the difference, the mind-body connection. So meaning that we can feel sexual energy coming from our body, and then what I wanted to study was what thoughts does the energy, if I just go unconscious to, we know we can consciously feel that energy within our body. I wanted to study what literal thoughts come to my mind when that sexual energy takes over my body. And I also wanted to study it the other way. So, if we want to feel that sexual energy, we can create that. That's kind of the one of the things with pornography, or, in many different ways we could study that, is if we put images and thoughts into our head, how can we influence our body to take on that sexual energy? So I wanted to study, being able to, at this point in my life where I don't have the monkey mind and I can recognize a thought when it comes up, I wanted to study the unconscious, what I might be unconsciously doing, just because, I don't study it. We don't study those kind of things usually. So here's the interesting part. This isn't so much about sexual energy, it's more about the influences that do not want us to do this work. Um, so we have so here's the personal story to it is, I've shared this challenge with certain people. Some people I know, and they know me really well, and they're cheerleaders. They're like, "Cool, let me know, what you come up with." And the couple of people that I've shared it that I thought might be a little bit more open-minded and might get, what I was trying to study, and their response was basically, sexual energy is just great, you got to release it. And it made me realize, like, that this dualistic trap that people are in actually stops us. It halts us from exploring, uh, you know, these kind of things, because the culture is telling me, on one side we have, the Puritans and you know, the idea that our sexuality has to be performed in a certain way with a certain person with the right genitalia, blah blah blah. And then we had a movement that liberated us from this and made us, don't be afraid of your sexuality, just let it fly, just be, let it, And so it's a dualistic trap, meaning that our culture has two profound messages. You either have this, shameful, this is exactly where you take your center, your sexual energy and trap it in a box. And we've seen what what happens when people do that. It creates resistance to a natural flow. It causes deviance, these kind of things. And then the other side, the free sexual beings, and just, you can do whatever you want with your sexuality. Don't be afraid to just, self-release, or, have one night stands. It doesn't matter, it's your body. You can do whatever with it. That's telling another story, and that's also just leading us down to accepting whatever our sexual energy is, that we can just let it go. And here's the extreme example of how that's bad. Is if we have this motion that says, basically, sexual freedom, and you could do whatever you want, and then with the caveat that, but you can't hurt other people. But I wonder if fostering this idea of, just do whatever you want, and then at some point there's this arbitrary line that we have to decide of when that needs to stop. When does your sexual fantasies need to stop? And for people who are in this dualistic mindset, they have this idea, but it's relative, and it swashes over this whole thing. So, but here's another like really seriously damaging cultural idea of just this sexual freedom thing is that if we don't question our sexuality, then we won't question things like how our culture influences that. And what I mean by that is, I discovered, when I started to study the unconscious, my unconscious, not trying to figure out everybody else, but figuring out how I was trapped by influence, on the outside influence. And I figured out that my um, sexual energy years ago was connected to the Photoshop um, world that we live in. Basically, this uh, idealism of perfection, the perfect female form photoshopped, the models all photoshopped, and so my sexual energy was then increased only by fantasy because in real life this doesn't exist. What the Photoshop doesn't exist, we can make it exist in our mind. I figured out, maybe I wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with that, but I can tell you that it unbelievably limited my perspective of the world. It limited my ability to connect with other people. Um, and when I liberated myself from the fantasy of perfectionism, it revolutionized my sexual energy and that sort of thing. So it's just interesting how this dualistic trap literally it hurts itself. The irony that's involved, the people that are out there just promoting, do whatever you want with your body and blah blah blah. And it's not that that's not true. How far is it true? And if I continue to use that statement, am I hindering other people? Am I influencing and persuading other people to live at a lower level? Um, so yeah, that's what everything beyond me is about, is exploring the unconscious, and we have to understand how these cultural movements hinder our truth. And the fact that people are so dualistically charged that they have to be in one camp or the other. There's no truth in either one. Like in the sexual repression and that sort of thing, and what there's truth in that. There's the truth of modesty. Does modesty as a virtue still exist? Or because if you go to the sexual liberation, then we would say, in that camp, it would be more like, no, modesty. No, take off your tops, walk around naked, have sex in public. It's all relative, it's all subjective, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, can't we take a little bit of truth from one thing and a little bit of truth from another thing instead of having to say, oh, this movement's right and this movement's wrong? Because I will tell you that if you pay attention and you're influenced by this dualistic, you won't even do it. They are telling you to not do the work. They're not telling you to look at and study your behavior, how things work, what's underneath, what's the truth that's underneath things. Um, so that's the message I wanted to get across today.